So you can see the theme. The entire theme of every conversation that was had this morning really touched on data. And like it was mentioned earlier, data has come up in every single one of these talks time and time and time again. So I'd like to take the opportunity to start that conversation using data, using measurable points, and getting a better understanding of how different people use that strategy in marketing to actually drive deeper results than just traffic and impressions. So I'm going to pass it over to our panelists here. I'm going to toss out our first question, and they can jump in and give their insights. So I'd like to start with Danny, and I want to find out from you, what analytics and data are you relying on that you make business decisions off of, aka what are you looking at and paying attention to as a marketer in your business?
Perfect. I'll actually stand up just so you guys can see me behind this podium. I'm Danny. And so I guess I represent the small business side of things. I generate a ton of leads, and the number one thing that I look at is how much do I spend that month and how many leads did I get that month. That's the number one analytical thing that I look at, because I want to know what's my average cost per lead. And knowing those numbers, I'll know how much does it cost going forward. If I want 100 leads a month, 200 leads a month, 300 leads a month, I'll know based on what my average is. That is, for me as a small business, that's the number one analytical thing that you got to look at. How much are you spending and how much does it cost to get that lead? That's the one thing that I focus on.
That's number one. All right, Michael.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Danny said there. Talking about leads, for me, is really low in the funnel when we talk about somebody who's engaged in buying a new car. So in the car business, our funnel spans a number of years from initiation, research, purchase intention to an actual purchase. So when we look at it beyond leads, there's a few other things that we would track, and one of those things would be actions. And we add layers to our process so we can help identify when the consumer is fundamentally moving from phase to phase to phase. And that is fundamentally addressed in our advertising and on our website. And that allows us to go back after these customers with new messages and new approaches so that we can collect that data, identify where they're at, and also understand how healthy our funnel is. If we don't get enough people, starting to do a build and price on our website, we know that in 2 months, we're not going to have enough people that are engaged in buying a Nissan product, and we need to do something to address that. So really, when it comes to looking beyond the traffic and the impressions, we build in fundamental phases on our website that we can then track and identify as indicators as to where the consumers are at, how healthy our funnel looks, and start to identify how many people can we talk to that isn't just about initiating the idea of, hey, it's time for a new car, or my lease is coming due and I need to get a new car. It's about making sure that we can see, okay, we have this many people who are just browsing our brochures, a number of other people, and it's typically less, who are starting a build and price, how many are finishing a build and price, how many are locating a dealer, requesting a quote, or asking for a test drive, and it's about making sure that we have that data and those triggers on our website to measure how many people are working down that funnel. And then fundamentally, we tie that back to where they're coming from to measure the performance. So if our digital advertising is driving, an $8 action, so an $8 build and price, we know how much we need to spend typically to get there. And then similarly, we use that as our benchmark and say, how do we get $8 down? How do we get $8 down to $4? And work towards that.
That's fantastic. I like the point that you were making about looking at the health of your funnel and the health of that traffic. So that's one of the things that I use in my business and with my clients is I'm a data geek and I'm a Google Analytics junkie. So I am in the back end of analytics constantly. I like setting up goals. I like having remarketing in place, and I like understanding, to your point, what channel that traffic is coming in from, and then the health of those individual channels. For example, with clients, I have clients that are working on Facebook advertising campaigns, and in some cases, those Facebook ad campaigns, yes, you're driving 3,000 clicks into your website. Great, the client's happy, everybody's happy, and they're getting some conversions. Well, what if that conversion rate could be better? When I look at the data and look at the analytics and look at the time that they're spending on the page, I'm looking at how many pages per session they're looking at, and I'm looking at that entire user journey. When we have paid advertising running into it, you can really line up different channels right on top of each other, and it jumps out right off the page at you on which ones are performing and which ones are underperforming. And that's the other point that I wanted to make in this, is that you might have a marketing system that you have set up. You might have third-party people that you engage with your business that are feeding you the data, that are giving you the information to say, look, we ran this campaign and we got this many clicks and you're getting conversions. Great. And you as a marketer go, okay, I guess it's working, right? But could it be working better? And how is it working in comparison to other areas? And how are you taking your marketing budget and reallocating those dollars based on what's moving the needle in sales and what's not? So for example, if you're pouring marketing dollars into Twitter advertising and Facebook advertising and LinkedIn advertising, measuring that data on the back end on the quality of that traffic and the quality of those conversions, are you paying attention to it? And if you're not, you might be surprised that, say you took your marketing budget for social and you evenly spread it across all 3 of those channels, but it turns out that only one of those channels is really, really driving high quality. First of all, it might force you to look at and examine your channels, your marketing tactics on the other channels. Or for your business, it might mean it's time to reallocate that budget. So I wanted to get an idea from our panelists here on situations that you've experienced or encountered where the data has made you reallocate either budget or reallocate tactics. Danny.
Sure. So the best thing about all this data that we collect is that we can reuse it. A lot of businesses are seasonal. So if your business is seasonal, you can start using that data. So say you ran a campaign 3 months ago, and you're driving them all to a specific landing page and certain people are opting in. You can create 3 or 4 different landing pages with 3 or 4 different call to actions and target 3 or 4 different subgroups on Facebook or on Google, and you can track which one is working. Come back to the drawing board the next season and reconnect with them. When you go to a website, you usually get a cookie put on your computer, and those advertisers, you guys can use that. So when I get somebody who comes to my website, I'm not constantly hammering them my branding and my products. I just get the cookie put on, and then on a seasonal basis, I'll just shake the tree and remind them of the product and service that I do or the new promotion that we have, let it run for a month, and then cut it. And then 3 months later, let it run for another month and cut it. So it's not like an always full force, but we're still always gathering that data so that we can leverage it in a meaningful way that reduce our overall cost. That's how I see it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Michael.
In terms of making actionable changes out of what we learned from our data, we're doing that on a weekly basis at Nissan. Now, we have the benefit of having an agency that comes in and pulls the analytics together for us. The unfortunate thing is we don't always get insights from that data. We just get, data presented in a really nice presentation. But what we do look at, we fundamentally prioritize. We sit down and say, when we developed this campaign, we wanted to achieve X, Y, and Z. So how are we doing against those metrics? How are we doing against those KPIs? And when we do that, we start looking at every piece of data that we have and start fine-tuning it to what's important. So in a digital display campaign, who are the vendors that we're using to push out our ads and which one's performing better than others? So we have programmatic layers, we have dynamic content layers, we have just broad auto industry websites that we buy. And it's very clear to see that when we put a cost for every action on our website and a cost for every lead that we collect, we can see that programmatic is typically going to deliver something better to us. And those are the customers that we know are already engaged with our brand. And that makes sense. But what's our benchmark for programmatic then? Because it's not going to be the same as the automotive industry. When I spend $4 for a lead or $4 for an action with programmatic buying, and those are the people that are already engaged, that's great, but I'm not going to sell any more cars this year if all I do is go after the people that already like Nissan. So I need to be spending $20 per action, $25 per lead. Honestly, I've seen numbers as high as $1,200 per lead for Nissan because we go after so many people and we spend so much money on marketing. But there's still a benchmark there. It doesn't mean that $1,200 is bad. It just means that that's what it costs to get a lead when I'm going out and spending the kind of budgets that we have to spend. But that's our benchmark. And then when I sit there and say programmatic's coming in at $1,000 versus $1,200, great. Do I want to spend more money there, or do I need to continue to increase my base and increase the number of consumers that I have to engage? So we rebalance those budgets. Similarly, we have to look at Google and weigh, our advertising versus our SEM. And I like to look at SEM very closely with SEO because The way we build out our campaign, we have 3 different tactics that go in there. Generic, how do we capture people who are just looking for cars? They don't know what brand they're looking for. How do we maintain the customers that are already engaged with us? And then how do we find new customers? So I'm going to go out and pay a lot of money to find someone who's looking for a Honda to come into Nissan. I'm going to pay, a little bit of money for the people that are already looking for Nissan, but unfortunately Google's got me in handcuffs and I have to pay for it because I don't want someone else to buy that ad space. And then when I look for someone who's going to buy a car, well, I'm not really relevant because all you searched was fuel efficient car and you don't really have any brand relevance or brand affinity. So that's somewhere in between. And I can't always rebalance that and just say, let's spend where it's efficient. I need to sit down and say, well, what's better for my business? Where am I finding more customers? And how do I spend the right amount in each of those channels? And then weigh SEM against my advertising and say, what's going to fill my funnel with the most customers and the most qualified customers? And I've seen where we've made decisions because we want to get more leads. We know that leads are buyers right now. But at $1,200 a lead, and I'm collecting 1,000 leads a month, great, I can optimize for that, but my optimization is going to deliver 50 more leads. Well, I just lost 100,000 people coming to my website because I chose to go for my most qualified customer at a really high cost as opposed to volume at a really low cost. And that's the balancing act because traffic's important to me, but there are some sacrifices. And that's the balancing act that we use the data to try and mine and figure out what's our best balance right now. What are the products that need to drive traffic that converts well? And how do we look at more and more pieces of that data? So, our cost per click, but then beyond that cost per click isn't that valuable to us. We look at our cost per actions, our cost per leads, and then we look at conversion rates. How likely is it someone comes in from this channel actually makes it further down our funnel? That's when we start to optimize and we start to build understanding. And I think one of the most important things there isn't just the data about what you're buying, where you're buying it, where you're serving it. Reflect on your creative. What is the content you're putting out there to engage someone? Because that initial click is only because it was relevant. And if you only have one piece of creative in market, the challenge you're going to have is you don't know if it's good or bad. If you have 2 pieces of creative in market, great, one's better than the other. But when you have 50, and I'm not saying you need 50, you're going to say, okay, these are my top 25, these are my bottom 25. Well, my top 5 deliver more than my bottom 45. So let's focus there. And what can we learn from it? How do we improve that? How do we optimize it? And start to figure out what is it that your customer really wants to see? And what metric is that driving? Is it driving your conversion or is it driving really low funnel? And is it cost efficient?
I think you just answered, I think, all of my questions all in one. That was amazing. In my case, you had touched on a point there about, the different channels on which ones are driving quality. And one of the tactics that I use is UTM code tracking. So anytime I'm putting a link out or an ad, whether that ad is on a social channel or whether that ad is anywhere that I'm laying it out across the web, using tracking parameters on that URL, and then being able to launch that out into the big, beautiful web and be able to track in analytics on the back end to see exactly how well it's performing. And then that helps me inform decisions when it comes to having to make those marketing choices. And I have to say, in some cases, without having that information at my fingertips, you're running blind. You're making marketing decisions kind of like a cowboy. You're just out in the wild, wild west of digital marketing. And unfortunately, at this stage of the game, if you're making marketing decisions based on your gut, your competition is crushing you. And if they're not crushing you right now today, they will be crushing you tomorrow, because it doesn't take very long for your competitors to pick up on what you're doing and pick up on, there are so many tools out there that you can use for analyzing your competitors, analyzing their websites, analyzing their SEO, analyzing their AdWords. You can analyze the heck out of things. You don't need to necessarily go that deep, but you need to go as far as it is relevant for your business, and you need to be paying attention. When you're not paying attention to these numbers, when you're not paying attention to these metrics, when you're not paying attention to the costs associated with the changing of the marketplace, the changing of where those budgets should go, then it doesn't take very long for your competition to come on market and take the rug right out from underneath you. An example of that, working with a lot of real estate clients, I've seen situations where you have a realtor who's been in market. They've been in market for 20 years, and they've been doing business the same way for the past 20 years, and they've farmed their market, they've sent out lots of mailers, they've done all the right things that they're supposed to do in marketing and relationship building, and they've built themselves up, and they've got a little website, and they're doing what they should be doing, which is fantastic. And then you get Jerry, who is freshly certified with his real estate license, who jumps on scene. He's got a huge social media following, and he just starts dropping content left, right, and center, and he is taking the business right out from underneath the seasoned real estate agents who have invested thousands of dollars into their marketing campaigns. So the point of that is that for those of you marketers who have been doing the same thing over and over because that's what's worked, it's not the same anymore. I mean, let's look at the past year. Let's look at the past year of all of the changes just in the social media space. Live streaming just launched. Facebook just launched their live streaming and rolled it out globally just shy of over a year ago. Can you imagine what the world would be like without live streaming right now? You can't. As marketers, you have to adapt and adjust. And if it's taking you a year to catch up to that, then you are going to get left in the dust. You're going to get left behind. And the same goes for your marketing and looking at your data and looking at your data tactics. And Michael and I had a conversation earlier about it's not a go set it and forget it landscape anymore. It's not a set up your marketing, set up your reports that you get on a regular basis from your third party or the reports that you're looking at yourself. It's not a set it up and then let it run for a year with your annual marketing budget and see where the pieces land. It doesn't work like that anymore because your competition is already dancing circles around you. It changes on a dime. It changes overnight. Your search rankings can change. The performance of your ads can change. I saw earlier tons of people put their hands up that you do Facebook marketing or that you've attempted Facebook ads, right? If you've attempted Facebook ads in that space, then you're more likely familiar with how you can launch an ad and you can have great success with it for the first week, first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You can be running that ad and it's performing well for you, and then all of a sudden, something changes. It stops. It falls flat. It's not performing for you. The costs are increasing. What has changed? Lots of factors have changed. It's a changing atmosphere. It's a changing ecosystem. So if you're not paying attention to these data metrics, and if you're not going deeper than just setting up the systems and saying, I'm driving traffic in there, and let it run, then you're not doing yourself a service and you're not doing your marketing a service, and there's a huge amount of money that you're leaving on the table. So I wanted to pass this back over to Danny, and I wanted to get an idea of an example in your business where you've had to make any tactical changes based on data.
Sure. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. It's a guerrilla marketing-based story. So there's an industry trade journal, and it's really expensive for us to advertise on that on a monthly basis, a couple $1,000s. So what I did was I outsourced to a virtual assistant to go through every blog and article that they had that related to my ideal client. This trade journal may not realize, but they're using Google AdWords on their network, so I just advertise through Google AdWords instead of them, and I still get my ads on their platform. And I can tell Google AdWords, I want it on this page, this page, this page, and this page, because I know my ideal client is an owner of the company. So if an owner of a company is reading this article, I know that's my ideal client. So I'll have an ad that looks like a related article, driving them to my website. And I'm usually not trying to capture their contact info right at the top. It's usually real high value, like a full webinar, a full 45-minute webinar, a full 20-minute webinar, where they don't have to give their name, phone number, and email. They can just freely watch the information. But above that video is a sharing button. I use Shareaholic. You can use whatever you want, but it has like a number, and it shows how many people have shared. So it's kind of like proof in the pudding. So it's showing all their friends. If somebody is interested in this video, they're obviously going to share it with their colleague down the hallway, across the country, or any other province. Underneath that video is related articles, and I know all the articles that I put there are related to those people because I know who they are, and they're all the products that I sell. And then when they click that, that's where I capture their contact information. So one, I tagged them because they went to that landing page. So I got them there. And then if they fill in on one of the related articles to get more information, I got their email address. So either way, I've got them. And then on a seasonal basis, I'll keep retargeting them. But it's not the type of when they come to my website, as soon as they leave and then go to Facebook, it shows that I know they were there. I don't instantly turn the switch on to the people. It's more of like a 2-month, 3-month type of thing, because it's a longer term incubation process. For me, it's not like they're buying shoes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't need them to buy something right away. I just need to get their information so that I can follow up. And that's just one example. I hope that helped you guys with seeing how you can gather data, but then how you can leverage it in the future. And repeat the question just so I can fully address it.
That's a great point. It was, we were talking about shifts in business because of paying attention to the data.
Because of the data. There was a time where we used to do a webinar series. We do live events where we do a conference like this, and we'll get 1,000, 2,000 people in a room, $500, $600 a seat. So it's pretty expensive. So what we have to do is we have to get people in smaller groups to get a taste of what we have to offer before they're willing to pull out their credit card. And so there was a market shift where a couple years ago I decided if a person comes to our free event, instead of just sending them to a thank you page, why don't we leverage the thank you page? And in that case, it would say, thanks for joining, don't come alone, invite a friend. And then it gave them the option to email their friend an invitation. And we had 600 emails invited out that year from people. And they just came and they were their friends and colleagues that we didn't have to pay more additional marketing to get them. So that was a good shift of us actually leveraging the thank you page in addition to just saying thank you. And that's the other thing, we started tagging the thank you page, because if a person sees our thank you message, then we know we captured their email. So in our future marketing, we don't have to rerun ads where we're trying to capture them, because we already got their email, we know that. So in those people, if we've got them identified, we'll just show them our free events, or whatever we got that's free, because we're just always trying to build who we are and what we do.
Great. And so the last thing I wanted to touch on was I wanted to get an understanding of what your top strategy is using digital marketing to stay ahead of your competition. So taking everything that we've kind of talked about, what are you doing differently in your marketing? How are you leveraging all of that information to actually stay ahead of your competition in your business?
Sure. So it's interesting. We do a lot of competitive analysis. We have all our agencies deep dive into what our competitors' creative looks like. We do benchmark testing with Millward Brown, even on our TV ads. You don't think there's a lot of data from TV, but there's a lot of consumer groups that can give you some good quant and qual data about what your message is and whether or not it's relevant. Honestly, I don't focus that much on what the competition's doing, because I know what's successful for us, and what's successful for our competition isn't always going to be relevant or successful for us. We compete as a Japanese auto manufacturer against Honda and Toyota, the two brands with the highest opinion in Canadian consumers' minds, and we are far trailing behind them. We're ahead of a lot of other brands, but the gap between us and first-tier brands is so immense that thinking about what they do is not even relevant to our business. So when we sit down and say, what do we do to stay ahead of the competition? It is about pushing ourselves to go further with what we need to do and making sure the benchmarks we set are not industry average. Like when we look at digital performance and you talk about, in my industry, the industry average is a 0.10 click-through rate on a digital ad. 0.10, really not impressive. So I have to put out millions of impressions before I get one click. That said, what I know is last year I achieved 0.18. Okay, not a huge success, but almost double what the industry average is. So now my new benchmark is, okay, I want 0.25. How do I get to 0.25? Because I do have channels that achieve that. I have channels that achieve above that. But how do I get all the other channels getting there? And that's where it comes to, now I need to sit down and talk to my creative agency. How do you guys create something that's more engaging? Is it a digital banner? And I think, honestly, one of my biggest pet peeves in advertising, and I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, is it really hasn't evolved. Billboard banners, big boxes, leaderboards. I'm a little disappointed with the web these days as to, really, is that the best you can do for the mass quantity of advertising volume that's out there? But I have to live with it. So then I sit down and say, okay, I want to be ahead of my competitors. I need to do better. We're growing. We've grown 75% in car sales in the last 5 years, which is big in the automotive industry, and it's put a big target on our back. But what we need to sit down and say is, how do we go even further? So my challenge to both my creative and my media agency is, give me something that connects with more of the right people and engages them to take more of the actions that I want. So dynamic content, remarketing. How do I start to build out 2,000 ads a month without actually building 2,000 ads? And that's dynamic content. And so it's out there. My competitors are using it. Social media is exploding, but realistically, we're in Canada. You know, when I put out Nissan Canada social media, I'm competing against global Honda, global Toyota, global Volkswagen, global Mercedes, Audi, all the brands that people just love to watch, even though they may not be interested in buying one. That's what I'm competing with. So everything I have to do is just about what's the smartest way I can spend every dollar. And I can't sit there trying to figure out what the competitors are doing, because unless I've got a bug in their boardroom, you can't figure it out just by watching their ads and market. You can get a little glimpse at it, but you're never going to get the whole picture. So what do you need to figure out is sit down and say, how do I get 5 years into the future in 1 year? And try and work towards that. I'm probably not going to get fully dynamic content in the next 6 to 12 months. It's not going to happen. I've been pushing, when I was at my previous agency, I pushed my last client to do it, and I got nowhere in 12 months. I've been at this company, I've been at Nissan now for 2 years. When I walked in the door, I dropped it on the table and said, agency, I want dynamic content in 3 months. It's been 2 years, and we've gotten nowhere. I'm still at the starting point. And it's that battle to say, this needs to get going. This is how we get ahead. And sometimes you get bogged down in the struggle of what keeps the status quo going. But you need to dedicate the time to say, this is where I want to go. This is where the business needs to go. We need to fundamentally build that plan to start doing those baby steps. And I've found that the only way it's going to happen is if you say baby steps. So I'll take dynamic content on product in 12 months from now. And then beyond that, I'll take dynamic content on messaging and remarketing. And I'll build that plan, and I'll force everyone who's working on my team to get there. But it really is a struggle. And that's why keeping that internal focus on what you want to achieve is the best way to stay ahead of your competitors and make sure that you can get there and build that plan.
That's great. Danny, did you want to jump in? And
Sure.
So just give us an idea of what strategy that you are actually using to stay ahead of your competition.
The biggest strategy that really worked for me was going after the gatekeeper of my ideal customer. So instead of me going after one person, making one sale and getting one transaction and one email, now what I go after is who is in control of those people. And I make products and services for them to give to those people for free. Now I have a relationship with those people. So like in the car world, I would maybe come up with an idea of free websites for automotive clubs sponsored by his company. And then now he's got grassroots people that are running around creating these car club websites, and they're getting 20 people, 30 people, 50 people signed up under them. They can remarket with the email that's logged in. So I really focus on not going after the one sale, but going after who are the people that control or have a big database of what I'm going after, and how can I create a product or service that's of value and free for them, because then it's easy for me to get my foot in the door. If I was to be doing like one-off transactions, then I would be leveraging the data for upsales. So you can go after more leads, or you can simply take the leads that are already converting and just upsell them. And there's not as big of a cost in doing that. So if they buy the pair of shoes as an example, and before I said you buy the shoes or you don't buy the shoes, either way you go to Facebook and you see the ad. Well, if they bought the shoes, don't re-show them the shoes. Show them the accessory that goes along with the shoes, like a shoe bag or something. I don't know what goes with shoes, but show an accessory that goes with shoes. And so on the if it's a shopping cart that you have an upsell. So you know they bought this car, show them these accessories that go with it. So whatever your product and service is, have an upsell system so that when a person even if they're not buying something, even if they're just registering for a free webinar, upsell them on the live event that you have coming up, or upsell them on this. And you know who they are based on the funnel and where they came from. That's what we did.
Excellent. So some of the final thoughts, we're going to open this up for a few questions, if anybody has questions. Some final thoughts, just wrapping this up, throwing in how I stay ahead of the competition, keeping it very simple level, is remarketing. Give me a show of hands if you use remarketing in your business. Excellent. Give me a show of hands if you do remarketing yourself. All right, so we've got some folks in here. There were a lot of hands that weren't going up. But when I'm talking remarketing, what I'm talking about are using things like your Facebook tracking pixel and your Google AdWords remarketing pixel, making sure those are living on your website, making sure they're functioning, making sure they're firing, making sure they're collecting audiences. You saw it in Amanda Bond's presentation earlier, the ability to capture those people, get them into your network, get them into your net, and being able to remarket to them without having their email address. It's a whole deeper level of tactic for you to be able to have more engaging touch points. And the conversation is all about attention span and engaging people. If you can catch their attention and if you can engage them, perfect. Then you have a better ability of attracting the right person that is the right fit for your business, and you don't want them slipping through the cracks. You want to take advantage of every ounce of that. So as far as I go, as far as staying ahead of the competition, using all the remarketing tactics possible to build those conversations and build those relationships on a deeper level. And I think at that, unless you gentlemen have anything else to add onto that, yes?
Just one thing, and it's not necessarily an ad, but I'd love to make sure that everyone in the room gets this because it's important. Don't just use advertising to reflect on your advertising. Use your advertising to reflect on your fundamental business model and everything that's existing that the consumer is engaging with, because often we try to optimize advertising. But what I've found in a lot of years of experience with this in the automotive industry is sometimes the fault with advertising is that it points out the problem with our website, right? We found out that we were driving countless clicks and lots of traffic from our French advertising, which was great. Honestly, my French agency is better than my English agency at building good digital ads. But we had an insane bounce rate. And there were two problems that we found there. One, we get a lot more mobile traffic in French than we do in English Canada, and our mobile landing page was horrible. And two, on our desktop experience, the digital ads in French were driving to a page that served up English content. So if anyone knows the French market in Canada, very distasteful, right? But the ad was perfect. The ad was driving everyone I needed, and I didn't have to change anything about my ad campaign, but we sat down and fundamentally changed where they were landing. So the performance of your advertising and the performance of all the data you collect after that person's clicked and the traffic's come in is important to reflect on beyond just the advertising. It's good to take back to the rest of your business and talk about, well, what's the message I'm serving up after they've clicked? And is that the right message to improve that channel and that flow of the consumer through everything you want them to do after they have clicked?
Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, we have one. Let's toss this out.
My question is about analytics. So both on the sales side and then further to your point about what happens to the actual customer when they're on their website, what suggestions specifically do you have that go past just the basic analytics measurement that companies should do to ensure that they're actually looking at the right data? So just beyond the actual basics, what are some tips that you can give them along the sales funnel that they should be doing and then along the customer retention side?
So I'll jump in on that side. If you're looking at, so your basic analytics, you should be looking at what channels people are coming in from, what pages they're looking at, how long they're spending on your site, looking at the bounce rate. If you have a high bounce rate, it's sending very negative signals through Google, which is going to hurt your organic search, which is going to cost you more per click in the long run for your paid advertising strategies. And essentially, it's like an ecosystem. You need to keep it healthy. And in order to do that, looking at those basic metrics are a great start. But from my perspective, that's where I like to go a little bit deeper into using UTM code tracking, and depending on if you use a particular CRM or a particular system that allows you to append additional tracking metrics on the end of your URLs, use it. Use it everywhere, use it all the time. Because I want to know, when I put an ad out on Facebook, I want to know exactly how that ad performed on a deeper analytical level than just how many clicks I got, or just how many likes I got, or just how many reactions I got. I want to know, that particular ad, is it hurting or helping my bounce rate? Do I have people spending more time on page, less time on page? I want to go deeper, but I want to be able to measure that. And in order to measure that, I add additional tracking metrics on to be able to look at it on a campaign by campaign basis, and then make tactical decisions based on how those individual campaigns are truly performing, not just being blind with the data and looking at it at face value.
The only thing that I would add to that is taking a look at your website and understanding your consumer and understanding all the data you can collect from your website, because the ad is just the open door, right? You're going to have traffic where people have hopefully typed and bookmarked your website name, and they're going to be able to enter it. We get a lot of volume of people who just type in Nissan.ca. At the same time, I have to unfortunately pay for everyone who types in Nissan on Google and then clicks on my first ad, because all they needed to do was add .ca and they would have made it to my site for free. But when you actually get into the site, you need to fundamentally break down everything that's on your site and say, am I putting everything on one page? Because if you put everything on one page, you're not getting any information. You're not actually able to track the progress of somebody who visits your site. Now, others will argue that the user experience of giving everything that a customer wants in one place is beneficial to you, but you lose all your data. So as long as you don't degrade the user experience by breaking it up a little bit, you start to build everything that you can track about that consumer. Look at what pages get viewed on your website. That's the first level of analytics. Where are consumers going? What are they doing? What are they consuming? If everyone clicks on one page and then only spends 15, 20 seconds on that page, they were looking for something that you didn't deliver them. So that analytic is important to you. But then if there are parts of your site that you value more, are people consuming it? Well, if they're not, why aren't they? And start to analyze it at that level. So the way we've broken it down, and we have in the history, looked at a lot of the different pieces of data. Over time, what we've done is started to reduce the set of data that we want to look at. And we're in the position of the amount of money that we spend and the number of consumers that come through our site, we're looking at big data. You could analyze a million different things and try to find correlations, and that's really difficult. So we fine-tune our focus and say, these are the things of value. How can we group them together and start to measure, let's define something as an action. Now, I don't have anything called an action on my website, but the start of a build and price, the finish of a build and price, a dealer locate, a download of a brochure, all qualified actions. So now I've started to say, okay, not everyone who visits my site is going to be the target of my remarketing. I want a different remarketing tactic for someone who started a build but didn't finish it. I want a different remarketing tactic for someone who located a dealer than actually requested a price on a vehicle. So you fundamentally just need to break down all the things that you expect or want someone to do on your website and make sure that you have something that captures them. And it's important to make sure you capture that based on all the different sources of traffic that you have. But it's also good to also look at the traffic holistically from whatever source they come from and understand what they're consuming. And that's the best part of understanding your consumer, aside from just understanding what your ads are delivering to you.
So I guess my question is what tools beyond the basic ones that Google Analytics offers you do you suggest that companies can use to make better defined segments to do just what you're suggesting? So custom dashboards you can set up.
So there's one that I use. It's called Sumo Me. It used to be called. They have this pop-up thing. Pop-ups are annoying, by the way. So pop-ups annoying, but it has a rule that says if they land on a particular page and they don't perform the action you want, then pop open. And we're getting an 8% conversion rate across the board. So if I get 100 people, I'll get 8 people opting in for whatever the pop-up is, and it's been that way for like 2 years. So that's a tactical tool that I use. But I also hear rumors that Google hates pop-ups, so it depends where you use it. So I wouldn't throw it on your homepage and everywhere, but there are times and places where you can use Sumo Me, particularly. That's a tool that I use. So I think that addressed what you're looking for.